Welcome to the RASOR Center podcast. Today, I got the opportunity to speak with Ox, who is a staff security engineer who is focused on cloud security. He has 13 years of experience in the information technology industry, and he brings a DevSecOps approach to the cloud security domain, which is something that we touch on a lot in the conversation. He also makes educational content about cloud technologies on Twitch, YouTube, and his Instagram channels. I'll be sure to leave a link to all of his information down below. In this conversation, guys, we touch everything from the relationship between GRC and security engineering. We talk about careers and the state of the job market. We talk about automation and sort of like what the future of risk and security looks like. So I really hope you guys get some education out of this, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. All right, we're live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the RASOR Center podcast. For you guys that don't know, RASOR stands for Risk and Security Open Research. That's sort of what my thing is now. Today, I have a very special guest with me. Ox is here with us today. Ox is a staff security engineer. It's interesting because when we first kind of got connected, we were both in similar stages in sort of like our tech social media kind of journey. So we've been kind of watching each other grow throughout that. But yeah, man, if you could just give people a little bit of a background of like what it is you do. Don't get into obviously too much detail, but yeah, just kind of an introduction to yourself.
Yeah. So, like Kyree said, my name's Ox. I'm a staff security engineer, and essentially, my goal is to help organizations secure their cloud presence across multi-cloud. Some organizations for hybrid and all that stuff, and we can talk about the differences between those as well. But at the end of the day, my goal is how do we make clouds more secure? How do we secure the applications that our developers are deploying into those clouds? And that's pretty much it at the end of the day.
All right, cool. So we'll get a little bit more into your background, but just quickly, because I know that we have people in our audience that are like 100% beginners. And
Yeah.
we also probably have seasoned professionals in our audience. So if you could just give us a general explanation of like when you say the word cloud, what exactly are you referring to? And in terms of like securing the cloud, right? Like what does that mean as opposed to securing like an on-prem system?
Yeah, of course. So at the end of the day, really, we're securing other people's data centers.
Yeah.
So the data centers that AWS offers for rental of their resources, their hardware, their storage units, when organizations want to rent those resources out to put an application, put a website, put workloads on those actual sites, we have to essentially make sure that the things that we're putting up into those data centers are secure. There's a really great way to think about this that AWS has published as part of their best practices. There's the shared responsibilities model, right? And simply, AWS is responsible for ensuring that the data center, the hardware, the access to the facilities, the electricity, all of that stuff is secure. It is always on. It's available for the customers that are paying to get access to it. But they are not responsible for the applications that their customers are putting into it. So you can write a really, really insecure application and put it in AWS. That's not AWS's fault, right? There's a delineation that happens between what the responsibility for securing the cloud is. And so I work for a private company. I'm responsible for helping the developers that are writing the apps do their work securely, post it up into AWS in a secure fashion.
Okay. And so how I have a couple things, like this can open up a can of worms here,
Sure.
but I wanted to talk a little bit about DevSecOps, right? Because I think that that is a atmosphere that you're involved in. But I never really understood what DevSecOps meant, right? Like I understand there's like the SecOps, which I believe is security operations part of
Yep.
that. But what is DevSecOps? And can you kind of talk a little bit about like what things were like before the DevSecOps movement and kind of what changed and kind of I guess evolved because of the DevSecOps movement.
Sure. So before we go into DevSecOps, we have to understand what DevOps and the goal that it's trying to achieve, which is how can developers and organizations release their applications and their new features faster, more efficiently, with less headaches. Back, before DevOps was a thing, essentially what you would have is a wall between the developers who are writing and testing and the new features for the application, and then the operators who are making sure that it is up, making sure that it is secure. And when those features would get released, they would dump it over the wall. You go ahead and release the application and take care of it. We're going to be working on the next thing. And so the whole philosophy of DevOps merged into one, essentially says, we're going to make the operators a little bit more like developers. Are going to have to learn how to do some automation, write some code, automate the things that they're looking for, the things that they're testing for. The developers are going to have to learn a little bit about the operations. How should they be writing the application to scale, right? How can it be highly available? What happens if where we're posting it, the infrastructure goes down? Is there going to be automatic failover? So there's a ton of worms here that we need to think about. And then the next iteration with that is like, okay, well, this is by the way, this is what we call the SDLC, the secure development lifecycle of the application. Now we have to think about how do we inject the security testing, the security systems into that development lifecycle? How do we ensure that the applications itself are being tested constantly with every commit, every change? How can we let developers know, hey, you just introduced a vulnerability, let's change it before it goes out to release. So they get the feedback rather than it being a reactive thing that happens that somebody on the internet found, hey, your application's vulnerable. We're finding it and we're letting developers know they need to fix it before it gets pushed to production. And so the whole idea of DevSecOps is implementing those security checks, those security tooling directly into the secure development lifecycle.
Right. And when you say implementing, right, because me coming from sort of a IT risk background,
Sure.
I think that in the GRC space, we're almost trying to move towards sort of that continuous integration in terms of, risk alerting.
Yeah.
Right. Sort of like when different risks across the organization corroborate to create like a bigger risk. I think we're moving towards that, but we just don't really have a lot of the technical infrastructure flushed out yet to necessarily go through like a DevSecOps movement in the context of GRC. But what you're talking about is building programs that automate security in the system development lifecycle or in the software development lifecycle. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So it can be in two different ways, right? The organization or somebody like me who has the skill set could either build a custom program, a custom thing, or we would go and look for vendors that, support the things that we are needing, that can help support us enforce what the GRC teams are wanting us to do. The way I like to think about the relationship between a security engineer who does DevSecOps and a GRC analyst or a GRC engineer is I view GRC as kind of like the judges, right? They are the ones that are creating the laws, looking at the standards and the frameworks and figuring out, okay, for us to not get fined, for us to not get sued by, an incident, we need to follow these frameworks. The security engineers, on the other hand, are the enforcers. We carry the blade that does the judgment or does the execution of what the GRC team is looking for, the judges and the executioners. So yeah.
Yeah. So for people online who are, interested, whether you're interested in GRC or whether you're interested in, security engineering, cloud security engineering, the relationship that Ox is referring to right now is sort of like a line one, line two relationship. You being on the line one, Ox, and basically implementing the controls that line two is usually prescribing or helping to prescribe. And it's usually a cohesive relationship, right? It's usually like the GRC analyst is working with the engineers to figure out, okay, here's where we see risk across the organization. Here's how this applies to your particular business unit. What controls do we have in place? what are our options here? And
Yep.
then we basically kind of go back and forth and make a risk-based decision around, what controls we should implement. Because I think one of the things that people don't really understand about that relationship is, and this is just from my personal experience, at the line one, it seems like it's so focused on the business unit a lot of the time, and that might be changing, but it
Mhm.
seems like it's so focused on the business unit a lot of the time that you kind of need the GRC professional to bring the context of the rest of the organization and say, all right, we could spend money on this control, but what's the benefit, the upside of risk or the downside of risk of us spending money on that control? And is there a higher priority control that we need to spend that money on over here in this business unit?
Yeah.
So it'd be
100%.
it'd be interesting for you to kind of, I guess, talk a little bit more about your experience with GRC teams
Yeah.
operationally.
So the big thing that we have to understand here is I view GRC as a pipeline into leadership. And why is that, right? We like, let's say the person that is outside the industry trying to figure out, I want to do engineering, I want to do GRC, whatever it is. If your ultimate goal, in my opinion, is to become a CISO or a CTO, like if that's your end goal, you should be looking at GRC risk-based routes. And why is that? Well, because you are able to translate the things that I would tell you, or I would identify for you into something that is actually meaningful for an executive, right? If I tell you, oh, we have 50,000, critical vulnerabilities, well, that doesn't really mean anything, but you have the background and the business acumen to be able to translate that and say, oh, okay, so we have these things here. This is how much it would cost us if it was actually exploited. Let me put this in a meaningful report that an executive can make a business decision for the next quarter, the next year, for us to go and create business decisions, data-based business decisions. Now, when it comes to how I actually interface with GRC, I have weekly meetings with our GRC team about things like identity, about things like secret sprawl, about things like what our CSPMs, cloud security posture management tools, are identifying as critical or 0 days. And I'm communicating these. We are trying to quantify the risk based on what type of application this risk is associated with, or the vulnerabilities associated with. What does this actually mean to the business? And should we be issuing things like service level agreements to get developers to go and fix these things right now? Or can it wait a week? Can it wait till the next sprint? These are all conversations that I'm having conversations with GRC about.
Got you. Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about third parties and sort of like your relationship with third party risk management teams, because it's GRC, I guess for me has been interesting because it's like I'm in a line two kind of position,
Mhm.
but we interact with third party risk management a lot. And a
Mhm.
lot of the times when we interact with third party risk management, it's like we have a vendor that's coming in and we assess the vendor, and then we're making sure that the vendor has controls that basically meet the security standards of our firm.
Yeah.
So do you support that kind of work and like from like a third party perspective or I guess do security engineers in general support that sort of work, or are you guys more like internally facing?
It really depends on the team. The experience that I've had in my career so far is if a GRC engineer or analyst or a risk person needs me to validate what these vendors are saying is, in their code base or is part of the feature set of the product that we're bringing in, I can validate those things. I can go in with, and check on those things and make sure, yeah, they're not being weird about things.
Yeah,
But essentially, um, I'm not I'm not going to be answering to vendor risk, requests 100%. It would be they need somebody to go and validate for them.
got you, got you.
Yeah.
So I want to get a little bit into your experience in terms of just like your journey. So
Yeah.
how did you find yourself sort of in the IT and security space? How long have you been in the space, and kind of what led you down this path?
Yeah. So August was my 13th year in IT, and I've been doing security for probably 7 years of that. I was going to college and I was trying to go into business. I was just all over the place. Young man, 20 years old, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life pretty much. Um, and I had my wife, my girlfriend at the time, who was telling me I was just frustrated, telling her, and I'm working on a server in my apartment, like a little Windows 2012 R2 server, trying to upgrade it, trying to learn, those things. And she tells me, you would probably make some decent money figuring out that computer stuff. You seem like you know what you're doing. I had no idea what I was doing. Um, so after that, I went and got a CIS degree. I changed my major from accounting to CIS, stuck with it, graduated. And, the hard thing about that is getting the experience, right? It took me a year from graduation to actually landing my first help desk job. And that's kind of the story I've told on TikTok and Instagram, like many times over and over. But I literally started at ground zero, making minimum wage as a help desk employee for a local MSP. And I worked my way up to system administration. I learned how to code in Python, and made my way into DevOps and now cloud security. And, it's 13 years later. So,
Okay.
yeah.
For people who don't know what an MSP is, that stands for Managed Service Provider.
Yeah.
Anytime we use like acronyms, I try to just keep in mind that the viewers who might be new.
Yeah. So that's a great point. The MSP that I worked for them for about 5 years, and they essentially brought me up from help desk to a system admin in those 5 years. And some of the tasks that I would do is we would be contracted by dental offices to come and manage their servers, manage their network, manage their storage. And when I was doing the help desk side of it, I would answer calls, help people walk through, their technical problems with their laptops. And as I moved up, I started actually driving out to these dental offices, doing hardware upgrades, running lines, patch panels, all of those things. I did that for about 5 years at the MSP.
Really cool. It's a couple things there. So like there's the evolution of your experience from on-prem to cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about that and sort of what that learning curve looks like.
Yep.
But the other thing I want to point out is that a lot of people that I talk to who are in the security space or the IT space have a really similar track. And like, I think that, and I want to get into this too, the reason that I started making content in the first place is because I saw that there was this gap in understanding of like what's being told on the internet and like what the reality of the situation is.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a really similar route. So like I started out as an accounting major. I didn't even want to go to college. I wanted to join the military. My dad was in the military. I ended up having knee surgery, didn't go into the military. Also didn't want to just like sit around.
Yeah.
So I watched a movie called Wolf of Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought like finance people made a lot of money and I could drive a Lambo. So I started out as an accounting major. And then that introduced me to like Big Four consulting. So I did a few like Big Four kind of like internships, and they actually introduced me to the governance, risk, and compliance space. So that was when, they had me doing stuff with Sarbanes-Oxley, and that's how I got introduced to that sort of thing. So I ended up switching my major over to computer science because I was like, for me personally, it was never really like a passion of like, I'm in fixing computers and stuff like that. And I think that's why I've always more so gravitated more towards the business side.
Yeah.
But I struggled through that computer science major. It was really, really hard.
You did it though. Congratulations.
I did it, man. I did it. But yeah, I kind of got a little bit off track. But I guess what was your sort of like trigger to start making content on social media about this industry?
Yeah, so it's quite funny. I was talking with my boss at the time about moving up from a senior to a staff engineer. Like, it's always been my goal. Like, I always wanted to be a senior something. And when I got to senior, naturally human nature, like, what's the next thing? I can't stay here. I'm only 25. I can't be a senior at 25. What's the next thing? And I moved up. I wanted to become a staff. That was my next goal. He ended up saying, if I ever wanted to be, what is considered technical leadership, staff is what a lot of organizations view as technical leadership. I would have to start becoming more confident and willing to do presentations in front of executives, CEOs, CTOs, and all of them. And I couldn't talk for anything. I could barely even do an interview with the camera on. There's no way I could have done this, for instance. And I'm still kind of scared going through even talking to you. It's nothing about you, but it's more about my nerves, right?
Yeah, same. It's nerve-wracking for sure.
Going and forcing myself to make little TikTok videos. I started making TikTok videos about a tool called Sneak, which is a SaaS tool, a security static application security testing tool.
Okay.
Right, it helps you find bugs in your code. Essentially, I started making little 1 minute, 30-second videos on how you can do that, and that's how I got started. Um, if he ended up saying if I wanted to become a staff, I would have to become more comfortable communicating, and I forced myself to do it. In two and a half, almost 3 years now, I became that staff. I got promoted, and now I'm actually helping people completely for free on the internet with the knowledge that I have. So, yeah, that's pretty much how it's going.
Okay. A couple questions off of that. One of the questions I wanted to ask before was, number one, the biggest difference between, I know I'm going to seem like I'm going all over the place.
No, you're fine. I love
The
it.
biggest difference between IT help desk and system admin is I think that's something that a lot of people in the entry level space will really find a lot of value in.
Sure.
And also the learning curve from kind of like IT help desk working on those on-prem systems to cloud. And do you think that people need to have sort of an understanding, a firm understanding of the on-prem environment in order to be successful in the cloud space?
I think it definitely helps because you have the context and you can make those mental shifts of, oh, like a VPC, that's just like my internal network when I was working over here. Or like NACL rules. Okay, well, this is how we create, network access control list rules. This is how we do them in the cloud. This is how I was doing them when I was a sysadmin on-prem. I think it helps make things adjust easier in comparison to I'm going to school just to go into the cloud. I think that's a huge thing. Is it a requirement? Absolutely not. There's people with all different types of backgrounds that have made it in this industry. Some with college degrees, some with none, some with a million certifications, some with none.
Yep.
It's really about your ability to acclimate to the environment that you are trying to work in. And
Got you.
for me, it was a natural thing. I had to get the help desk job in order to move up because that's all I was able to be qualified for at the time.
Yeah.
But do I wish I could have skipped the first 5 years of my career and just just gone straight into DevOps? Absolutely. But it just wasn't how it worked out for me. Now, to answer your other question about the differences between help desk and sysadmin, for my case, it was, am I working with, it's always human based, right? Like I am working with the front desk administrator of a dental office. I'm working with the person that is intaking customers. Their computer's not working. Let me walk through them the problems. When I got to the sysadmin, it's like, oh, okay, so this is how the entire network for this particular dental office is configured. When things go wrong, who are people going to look at? They're going to look at me to make sure that things are up, make sure when things are down, I can bring them back up. And so who are the people that care the most are the business owners of that dental office. Right. So now I'm interfacing a lot more with people who are actually paying, the MSP, the money. I'm dealing with the people that are actually cutting us the checks. And
Gotcha.
so that's essentially how, for my particular MSP, it was different. It was just a different type of person that I was having to, to answer to. You're always answering to the big boss at the top, but it's more like I'm actually having conversations and building relationships with these business owners.
Yeah. So it sounds like, just to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what you're saying, it sounds like at the help desk level, you're more so helping the end users,
Right.
sort of like navigate and troubleshoot. Whereas at the administrator level, you're more so basically like providing network support in a way.
Yeah. Now, a great example of this is one of the doctor's offices. They wanted to go and expand to 2 more locations within the year that I was working. So we went to the locations that they were renting out, and we helped design and architect where the lines would run, where the patch panels would live, the entire server room. Like that's something you can't really expect from a help desk person.
Yep.
It's something with somebody with a little bit more experience. And obviously it's not a one-man gig, it's a small team, but being able to communicate with the business owner, okay, this is how much wire we would need. This is the type of stuff that we would need to put into the server room to keep it cool. These are the types of switches that would fit the entire bandwidth that you're consuming. So it's a bigger deal, right? So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds a lot more holistic.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So pivot again.
Sure.
I know I'm kind of like I
No,
have
good.
so many questions, but I don't know how to like organize them into like a storyboard kind of flow. I kind of just
That's all right. That's how my brain works too. So we're good.
yeah. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the state of the IT security job market right now. I know that that's something that a lot of people have different opinions on.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I think that's why my brand on social media was kind of is where it is because that's kind of what I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
But I guess why do you think that number one, do you think that hiring or getting hired is much more difficult than it was before? If so, why? And we'll talk about, we can kind of talk about solutions and things like that afterwards. But I kind of want to know if that is what you think, and if so, why or why not?
Yeah. So there's kind of a nuance from my opinions, and I could be completely wrong about this. um, I feel like people who are new are coming in to the industry are having a much harder time than people who have 10 plus years of experience. It's still hard for people like me. My LinkedIn DMs are very dry right now. But it is harder for organizations to want to bring on somebody with no experience because of what they're expecting on the output, for these people. And they'll always give the excuse like we don't have the time to train,
Yeah,
and it really is a problem. And I think people like me, people like you, we should be advocating for internship programs for the young generation. We should be trying to advocate. We don't need a senior engineer for this role. We could bring on a junior, bring them up in a year, in 6 months, if they're smart, if they can hang. They won't be a junior anymore. It's they will get to that mid tier, potentially even senior, depending on how good they are. But it just depends. I think there needs to be advocation from the IC level to the leadership level in comparison to what there is right now. We need to bring training up the next generation for sure.
yeah, I 100% agree with that, and that's kind of like that's kind of the goal of what I'm trying to do with RASOR Center.
Yeah.
I think that there is something to be said about. I don't even know if I want to give up my secrets right now, but I think that so much focus has been put on large enterprise, right? FANG,
Hmm.
Big Four consulting, right? That sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I think that because security and IT is becoming just more prevalent at the mid market and small to medium sized business market level
Yeah.
than it was, let's say 5, 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity for entry level people in those markets with the right guidance, with the right training, and with the right um I want to say like mechanisms, even though that's a broad statement. But what I'm trying to do with RASOR Center is basically bridge that gap between how do we get entry level people exposure into this mid market sector that I think is sort of kind of going to be like the next iteration of enterprise, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like enterprise as a whole is becoming a lot more decentralized, right?
Yeah.
Third party risk management is, I mean, every Gartner report that you read, third party risk is going to be, in the top three,
Yeah.
in the top three things. So, how do we get entry level folks to pay more attention to mid market or to pay more attention to like non tech companies to
Yeah.
work at, right? Like
Yeah.
there's tech everywhere. There's tech in the oil industry, there's
Hmm.
tech in the finance industry, there's tech in the education industry. But I think that so many people are just so fascinated with like FANG companies and things of that nature that it's like that's all they apply to.
Yeah.
And those companies, honestly, I personally don't think I'd want to work at, you know, a top FANG organization. I'll leave that there. But what
No.
are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that and sort of like the mid market opportunities?
Well, I definitely think that having people like us are a good step forward. For example, and I've been very clear, I've never even been approached to even do a interview at a FANG. I've never worked at a massive FANG like that before, and I don't plan to in my career. Why? Because the type of work that I do right now is very challenging and very interesting, and it keeps me, it keeps me going. Every day is a little bit different, and I get paid very well for it. it's more of like a risk thing. Do I want to be as stressed as what I hear a lot of these people that work at Fangs do? No. When I get off of work, I like having energy to hang out with my kids and my wife, and I like having my bills paid and not worrying about that. And the mid market really allows for that.
Yep.
If you guys look me up on LinkedIn, you'll find out exactly who I work for. It's not hidden or anything like that. But I used to work for a grocery store, and we had Kubernetes clusters. We had multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. We had some of the smartest people I've ever worked at a local Texas-based grocery store.
Yep.
And some of the cutting edge custom stuff that you would never think about, like the analytics for all of the purchases, distribution, and all of these types of things are cutting edge technologies that I think if people coming into the industry thought about, Home Depot, for example, is a huge one. They have like a massive tech presence, right?
Yep.
You would never even think
Yep.
Home Depot, HEB, Walmart, Walmart's pretty big. But what I'm getting at is if you are in the industry, don't isolate yourself to these massive, big organizations, because there are plenty of mid-market orgs that are hiring right now because they can't find the people with the skill sets.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that, man. It's like, even we'll talk about a little bit more about this, I guess, offline, but like, I think that consultants, VCSOs, and those sorts of people have a unique opportunity to bring people onto their teams that are in that kind of like entry level space because they're already kind of like dominating that mid market.
Yep.
And that's like literally what the goal of RASOR Center is. It's to sort of like bridge that gap. But we'll talk about that. So do you have any questions about, like, for me? I always like to, like, in my interviews, I've been trying to be more, I guess, balanced and not just like asking a bunch of questions.
Well, I think from my side, right, is when I'm dealing with these GRC people about the vulnerabilities and everything we were talking about earlier, like, how do you ingest those challenges and how do you actually communicate, right? Because that's a challenge for me. Like, how do I communicate these things to executives? Is there a certain framework or is there a certain way of going about, digesting and figuring out how are you going to make this actually meaningful to the people that can make the decisions about them? Like,
100%. So that's like 80% of what my job is as a GRC analyst. So particularly in the risk space, right? So I work in the IT risk space, and we will basically work with line one control owners, engineers, things of that nature to figure out, what the problems are. But in terms of like how we ingest the problems and then how we spit back out to leadership, it really depends on, it's very dynamic. So like, this is where the people skills part kind of comes in, because now it's like, I need to understand this business leader might like memos. This business leader might like dashboards and reporting. Right. So a lot of what I do is setting up reporting mechanisms so I can just have all of the data that I need to be able to sort of like dynamically tell these stories of, this is where we're seeing high levels of risk. This is where we're seeing low levels of risk. Establishing accountability is a big one. So like a lot of the times I'm chasing down line one control owners and saying, we've made an action plan for to implement this control. The action plan's coming due. What's the status on that? And then I can report out to leadership on that so that we can actually have that. The whole thing about it is like, nothing happens at an organization without people being accountable for it to happen. Right. That's sort of like the value pitch of governance, risk, and compliance is like, we are able to understand the business side of the organization. We're able to understand the technical side of the organization and provide value to the organization by saying, okay, how are we going to establish predictable accountability through governance to ensure that the things that need to happen in order to secure the organization and help the organization meet its goals are actually happening. So that's sort of what the philosophy is around sort of the GRC. I don't know what to call it, like the GRC atmosphere. And then there's various different ways to do that. Most of the time it's through reporting. Most of the time it's pulling insights out of a risk register and saying like, these are the amounts of action plans that you guys had in December versus November. And then kind of digging more into those insights as to like, why are we seeing this many action plans getting the date changed, right, and
Yeah.
getting extended, right? What
Hmm.
does that mean if someone keeps on extending the date for an
Right.
action plan, right? Either we overestimated or underestimated how long it would take to actually implement this, and we need to, think
Yeah.
about that a little bit more and have better dialogue with our engineers,
Yeah.
or something at the business unit level is just organizationally wrong
Yeah.
to, this business unit just can't get their act together and like actually implement the stuff that they said they were going to implement.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like the police
Yeah.
of the corporate setting in a way.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the big things that you were mentioning is like governance, right? Like keeping accountability. One of the big projects that I had this year was revamping our cloud tagging strategy, right?
Okay.
So there was a lot of meetings with GRC about what do you guys actually care about when it comes to accountability? What would you like to see? And then how on the engineering side can I make that happen for you?
Yep.
Right. So it's we have said tools that can provide reports for you, but I need to have those reports configured in a way that is in line with what you want. So I need to do things like create Terraform modules for our cloud infrastructure teams to be able to use for like golden pathways to deploying into production, for example. Or how do we stop something from happening in the environment in the first place if it doesn't satisfy the requirements that GRC is setting out? And so that's why it's like there's a dance that's happening between GRC engineer or analysts and security engineers. And I think some of the best teams are the ones where the engineer has understanding of the compliance requirements and the frameworks that the organization needs, and then the GRC person is able to understand some of the technical jargon that the security engineer might be talking about as well. So it's like there should be some type of balance. So you should be able to sit in a meeting kind of like we are right now and get to the destination. You know, I found in the past that some engineers lack that compliance framework understanding, like SOX, NIST, ISO 27001, and then vice versa. Like a GRC analyst wouldn't even know what's EC2 or what's object storage, and not
Yeah.
there should be a balance of technical and compliance understanding as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something, honestly, like, to be completely honest with you, that I've lacked in my own career is like,
Mhm.
not well, I do have a background in computer science. So my big advantage as a GRC analyst has been I might not know some of the technical elements like right off the bat, but
Yeah,
I know enough to be able to ask the right questions, and I know enough to be able to look at documentation and understand to a pretty finite level
yeah,
or granular level, sorry, of like what's going on. So I
right,
think that like being able to learn really, really quickly is, in my opinion, more important than necessarily like having the technical chops, because the
right,
technical stuff, like when you break down, like if I'm looking at an architecture diagram,
yeah,
right, and I'm looking at, we have S3 buckets over here, we have EC2, like I can go on AWS's website and look up like what does an S3 bucket do
right,
and kind of break down, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. But one of the challenges that I've had, I guess this is more of like a social corporate challenge, is like because I'm looked at as like the GRC analyst, like the non-technical person coming in and
sure,
trying to tell my boss that I'm not a step, like that I'm not putting these controls in. Uh, I feel like there's sometimes a lack of patience at the line one, because it's
yeah,
like I need to feel comfortable enough with the line one control owners or control implementers
yeah,
to be able to have that dialogue and ask them questions and say, hey, I don't really know, how this AI model works.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I've never had to be introduced to that, so I don't really know what's going on. So, um, again, this is the social aspect of it, is being able to have those conversations and really just understand how people think, how people operate, what's valuable to people, not waste people's time, right?
yeah,
How to be a good teammate. Those are the things that I think are important across the security space as a
mhm,
whole.
absolutely.
So, yeah,
And the thing is, like, if you knew to the level of being an engineer, you'd probably apply to be an engineer. Like, no one, for me, whenever a GRC analyst comes to me, like, I'm not expecting them to be a engineer, right? I'm not expecting you to implement everything and do all the stuff that I would need to do. But it is nice whenever a GRC analyst comes and I don't have to say, oh, like this is an S3 bucket, like this is an EC2 instance, like a server, or this is like a distributed system. Like we can just talk naturally, and it's fine if you are like, what is that again? Like, let me get these things straight real quick.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But when it's like 3 or 4 times in a row,
yeah.
you know, but like if you like, I have respect for the people, the GRC people that come up and they're like, yo, we have these buckets, they're doing this. What can we do to help? Right? Like, or what can we do to help secure this? Like that. I love it. It's so nice.
Yeah, and a big part of that is just preparation. Like, if I know that I'm going to be put on an assignment, it's like I'll take a week or 2 to upskill myself
That's
on,
right.
you know,
Absolutely.
what technology it is that I'm going to be assisting with.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that though, because one of the best IT risk advisors that I've ever worked with in my entire life comes from an architecture and engineering background.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's just like always
on it.
On point.
Yeah, dude.
He has the context of, you know, the context of the engineering side, so he can always make those estimates of like how long should an action plan actually take, right? Like how long is it actually going to take to implement this control?
You want to be able to know when somebody's blowing smoke up your ass.
Exactly.
Like you want like
exactly.
you're telling me it's going to take me 6 months to do something that'll take me like 2-3 days. Like
exactly.
Come on. Yeah, and then you can push back, right? And then overall that makes the organization more secure whenever you have that, you know, that aptitude to be able to say like, no, I'm pretty sure based on your backlog, based on your cycles, and based on my knowledge of how this works, it's not going to take 6 months.
Yep.
You know, that kind of thing.
100%. And then you get into like, okay, maybe it'll take 6 months if you guys have other priorities, right?
Yeah. So provide me justification and let's put it on the risk register.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Want to pivot again a little bit into emerging technologies. I know that AI is getting a whole lot of attention right now, right? Like you can't walk into an office without someone talking about generative AI at this point.
That's why I work from home.
I wish, man. I wish. Working from home. We can talk about that too, like the benefits of working from home versus.
Sure.
Have you ever worked in an office setting?
Yeah. When I was working at the grocery store, we worked in an office.
Okay.
5 days a week.
Yeah. Working from home, man, is a luxury that people don't understand until. So I worked fully remote, and then I switched jobs, and now I'm in the office, and it's just like sometimes I'm like, did I make a mistake? You know?
Yes.
Yeah, working from home is great, but in terms of emerging technologies, I know that AI sort of gets all the glory right now just because, you know, it's become a lot more accessible to your everyday consumer with generative AI. As an entry-level professional, right, someone who's trying to break into this industry, one of the hard conversations that I'm having is like, it almost feels like you have to learn everything at one time. Like you have to learn the fundamentals just to like, because you just have to know them. But in order to kind of like sell yourself to an organization, it's kind of like you have to upskill on these emerging technologies as well. What would be your advice to someone who's, you know, trying to just figure out, says, hey, I want to be in security in general.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have to learn? Fundamentals included, emerging technologies included. What should people be like kind of paying attention to in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think I usually give the advice for people to focus on their T, right? The letter T, the capital T. It has a wide horizontal line and then a vertical, right? And if you put left, middle, and right part of the horizontal part of your T, you should have a balance of networking, systems, and development / automation. No one's expecting you to be a developer unless you want to be a security developer. That's another thing. Yep. If you can focus on building a good foundation of systems, networking, and automation, with the core being networking, like really, like if you're trying to become security engineering, if you focused on networking and you are willing to work your way into security, right? Like one of the things that I have a hard time with is college students saying like, I graduated, I'm ready to become a security engineer. Okay, what experience do you have? I graduated college and I'm ready to be a security engineer.
Yep.
If you can work 6 months to a year as a sysadmin working on Linux and Windows systems, if you can work on as a network technician, plugging in patch panels and configuring switches, like that, to me, if you can do that, that is security work. You don't have the security title, but
Mhm.
it is 100% security work. Because you are putting in the reps, right? No one goes into the gym and starts bench pressing 225 unless you're me. But no, but you're putting in the reps, and that opens up more doors. You can stay down the networking route, you can stay down the systems route if you wanted, but you 100% become qualified to do a security job, like a security engineering job. So is it a lot? Absolutely. But it's absolutely crucial that like, okay, this is why we are using Linux for this web server. This is because, the cloud is really mostly all Linux, in my opinion. So yeah, build your T. Once you have your foundation, focus on one. You can pick automation, you can pick networking and go deep into that. You can go into systems, go deep into that. You can pick the development, go deep into that. It doesn't really matter. But having a good, strong foundation and then being willing to work your way into a security role is absolutely crucial, because those technical chops are great. Like when you log into a box and you're doing an investigation, what are you logged into? A terminal, right? How do you navigate a terminal? Well, you probably figured that out when you were doing your junior sysadmin role.
Yeah,
You were putting those reps in, it becomes muscle memory. You're building up from there. So
got you.
don't be sad or depressed that you're not getting the security engineering role, because those other roles are, like, in my opinion, prerequisites to getting into a more technical senior role, security role. Like I've said in the past, I think you agree with me that security engineering jobs are like entry level security engineering jobs are kind of like, entry level like systems and networking jobs are more like mid-tier security jobs. Like
Yeah,
so you gotta work that way up. You got to build the reps. You got to get that muscle in.
yeah, I agree. It's funny because it's like I'm at a stage in my career now where I'm sort of trying to decide like what I want to do next.
Yeah.
And I really do like the IT risk industry.
Hmm.
I do wish that I want to gain a little bit more of those like technical chops and kind
Yeah.
of get back to programming, get back to automation, and the reason for that is because I think from what I see in the industry, and this is kind of what we can talk about too, is like figuring out kind of like a niche, I guess you can call it. I don't know if you call it a niche or a niche.
Yeah, I call it niche.
Okay. Well,
Whatever.
figuring
It don't
that out
matter. It doesn't matter.
is like for me, the governance risk and compliance space, I can see automated automation trying to kind of like build its way on top of these like traditional GRC functions. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get ahead of that for my own career development and kind of like,
Hmm.
all right, how do I learn automation? Okay, well, I need to understand, the basics of object-oriented programming, the basics of scripting, and the basics of robotic process automation even, right? How do I get assignments at work where I can actually get my hands on this stuff? Well, I create my own assignments, right? I automate my own
Yep.
workflows and I automate my own things, and then it gets broader into automating things for my team,
Hmm.
automated reporting for my
Yep.
team, centralized automated reporting for my team from a GRC perspective is important. So,
Yep.
would you say that in terms of like what you do as a staff security engineer in the cloud space, do you have like a special kind of like do you have something that you would call like your thing, kind of like where you're a subject matter expert on a particular
Yep.
thing?
Well, that's how I kind of transitioned. I was telling you before, I went from sysadmin to DevOps and cloud engineering.
Hmm.
The reason I was able to jump over to the cloud security side of it was because I was an SME for a security tool, a secrets management tool.
Okay.
And that tool became very popular in the industry. It still is today. It's like the number one secrets management tool, HashiCorp Vault. I'll just put it out there.
Hmm.
I was like the vault guy, helping organizations secure their secrets. It became very popular and still is in my opinion, one of the hardest problems to solve at scale these days. So you really could become, like, if you wanted to focus on a very specific thing, I'll mention two things. One, the first thing, as you mentioned, do not be do not be restricted by what your organization would give you in terms of assignments. You're talking about growing your skill set. If you want to grow in your career, you are going to have to put time after work upskilling in the thing that you want to do,
Yep.
right? Kyree, you want to move over to doing some more GRC automation stuff. Well, you're going to have to put in the reps, and you cannot be waiting for your organization to give you that stuff. You have to make your own future, right?
Yep.
So do that. The second thing is putting yourself in the rooms in which the people that have the job that you want, put yourself in them, inject yourself. You don't even have to say anything. Just start listening, join Discord groups, join communities, start figuring out what the tools are, and eventually, use that knowledge and bring them in. This is what I was talking about in a stream like 2 days ago, where there was a guy that was asking me, like, how do you go from a senior to a staff? How do you like go and get yourself promoted? You become a force multiplier, right? When you bring in those new tools, those cutting edge tools, those new ideas and philosophies, and you're able to implement them, you're able to go and look for vendors that are doing the ideas that are coming up, and you're able to implement them into your team. You become a force multiplier. Your organization, your unit becomes more efficient, becomes a little bit more reliable, I guess, for you. Like the people on your team view you as more of a problem solver, and overall, you really do get to become like a thought leader, right? It really is important to be viewed as a thought leader. Perception is everything in this field. It really is.
Yeah. So what you touched on there is really, really important for people to understand. Like, career advancement is very multidimensional. It's not linear at all. And I
Right.
think that a lot of people have this misconception, whether you're at the entry level, whether you're at the mid level, kind of like I am, or whether you're at the senior level like yourself, it's an array of things as opposed to just like, oh, I get this certification and that automatically, says that I'm qualified to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no. So the thing that really clicked with my content was when I started talking about this idea of leverage and this
Right.
idea of, yeah, getting the certification is great. But like, if you want to beat out the competition, right? Because let's be honest, right? This is a highly competitive industry.
Super.
You want to have the certifications. If you can get the degree, you want to have the degree.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do projects, do projects. You have to network. You have to go to the events. You have to be in the whatever. If things are frozen for you right now, like they are for me, it's fine.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm fine. I can see you fine.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Things were just a little bit frozen, but the app that I'm using, Riverside, like picks up on it, and it
Okay.
like it'll be fine when the video actually comes out.
Okay.
Couple more questions for you before we kind of wrap up. Number one,
Sure.
and this is kind of like a vulnerable moment for me, I guess, because I feel like a lot of times because I'm like in the security space, like people just think that I like know everything, but I don't. So like,
Yeah.
if you could kind of go over for me, what is secrets management? Because it sounds like when you say secrets management, it sounds like kind of such an intuitive term.
Yeah.
It's like I'm managing secrets, but like,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean from a organizational perspective, and then also from like a technical process perspective? Like, what does secrets management mean when you say that?
Yeah. So there's two different types of secrets, right? There are two categories, I guess you would say, and that's human-based secrets. So your passwords, how you log in, your username, password, and then there's machines. How do machines authenticate to each other, right? So how does machine X and machine Y, are they allowed to talk to each other? But two, how do they authenticate to each other? So things like certificates, right? So when we're talking about secrets management, we're talking about how do we ensure that the machines and the humans are, not storing their secrets, their way of authenticating to a system in a insecure manner.
Okay.
How are you not putting your secrets in your source code? Are your passwords frequently rotated? Are your secrets automatically rotated? There are vendors out there like Vault. I am sponsored by Doppler, who is a cloud-based secrets management platform that do it. There's tons of different services that are out there, and it really is like a philosophy. Like, how are our developers going to, run our pipelines to deploy our applications in a secure way? How are those API tokens and JWTs generated and dealt with? And How do we alert whenever we find that one gets leaked? How, like, if one gets leaked, how do we rotate it like that, like in a snap, right? Those are all things about secrets management that we think about, really.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I got to look more into that. It's not really a concept that I've come across. I probably have, just in kind of like an auxiliary way.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds very reminiscent of like kind of identity and access management in a way.
Well, it's a component of identity access management, right?
Okay.
So you have auth N, auth Z, right? So
Mhm.
authentication, authorization. Well, how does a system, generate a token or generate a password, or how do you create a password that allows you to perform those actions like auth N and auth Z? Like,
Right.
that's secrets management. Are you, like, on the application side, right? Are you using secure, like, crypto libraries like bcrypt and all them, right, to generate JWTs and passwords and all the things? Are you, like, how is your application granting access to both humans and machines in a secure way? And then from
Understood.
the human side, how are you actually interfacing? Are you using secure protocols? Are you using HTTPS and all those things?
Cool. Okay. Now, this part of the conversation is probably going to be a little bit more of like what people are familiar with through at least your old content. Your content has gotten a lot more technical since you
Yeah.
like since you started. But I want to talk about this concept of decentralized education in the context of like the IT and security space, right?
Hmm.
People spin up these boot camps, people have programs. I'm building a program.
Hmm.
I know that you do a lot of your education and things like that for free.
Hmm.
Um, I guess my question is like, how do you feel about this space, and what would be your advice to someone who is looking at a boot camp or looking at a program or looking at free education or looking at college to kind of try and like navigate what's best for them? And the reason that I ask is because, and this is just my personal opinion, could be completely wrong. I think that traditional education from university is becoming obsolete. The price of school is becoming a lot higher, but the enrollment rates are dropping steadily. You
Hmm.
don't get the same value. You don't get that same kind of like guarantee that you did before. It was like there was a time where you could go to college, and just the fact that you have a bachelor's degree kind of like, all right, well, like the natural next step is to get a job. So I do think that decentralized education is kind of the next antidote to it. And not just education. I think everything is becoming decentralized, right? Money's becoming decentralized. Enterprise is becoming decentralized. We were talking a little bit about that earlier with like these mid markets. And I think that the decentralized education industry as a whole is going to be really important for the development of young professionals kind of like going into the future. But because there's not really any sort of like regulation around it, you kind of have to really be careful about where you put your money, where you put your trust.
Yeah.
So what would be your opinion to people in that situation looking at different routes of education?
Yeah, I think you should always be trying to protect your wallet at all times. The biggest gripes that I have, especially with, like, there's a new boot camp that's out on TikTok right now that's trying to get people in, is um it's not necessarily that I'm against boot camps. I'm against the deceptive marketing that typically comes with the boot camp. There is nothing wrong with Kyree creating a course. There's nothing wrong with Dave Eddy creating a course on Coursera about this is a course on learning how to use Bash. Like, I
Yeah.
think he was considering doing something like that.
Mhm.
It's more of, okay, hey, my name is Kyree and I'm creating a course. And if you go through this course, like, you are going to get, you'll be prepared for a GRC job.
Yep.
Like, it is irresponsible for you or anybody else that is considering making a boot camp or a course to use that type of language to people that don't know better.
Right.
Right. Because right now, people in society are more desperate than ever to get the skills to make the life that they want.
Yep.
And they will go and take out loans, and they'll do whatever they can under the deceptive marketing that you have. And you hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. People like, I spent $20,000 on a boot camp. I graduated, can't get a job. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's super unfortunate. There's not, I don't know if there should be regulation or anything like that. It's not really my wheelhouse to say. But what I can say is, my wallet is being protected because I'm always going to be skeptical. I'm going to do my research 100 times over before I open up my wallet to a course or to a boot camp. And what I will say right now is you can learn everything with AI. You can open up Cloud or Chat GPT, create a custom GPT to, I want you to be a mentor on GRC analyst, create me a 6-month curriculum, and you can just talk back and forth and build your own education using artificial intelligence. You really can. Like I'm using AI right now to learn Rust. Like I'm better now than I was a month ago.
I'm using AI right now to learn AI.
Yeah.
There
you go.
I built a custom Chat GPT. I guess you call it a project in Chat GPT. But I'm feeding it like NIST AI risk management framework, just the entire PDF.
Yeah.
I'm feeding it, all of these different assets that I'm coming across that are online for free.
Yeah.
And then I'm just having these conversations, building out my curriculums, training it, and upskilling kind of like for, some objectives that we have for next year. But yeah, man, I completely agree with what you're saying. The only thing that bothers me is you can pay X amount of money for a boot camp, right? Mm-hmm. And people say that that's a bad thing, but I feel that way about universities as well. Like,
oh yeah, no, the same.
All right,
yeah,
cool. I'm the same way. Are literally just boot camps with like the name of a university attached.
No. I think if you're trying to get, well, I'm not necessarily sure. Again, like what I was saying earlier, if you're trying to become like a CISO, right, this might not apply, but I have no desire to become a CISO. If you want to be a technical person that does like technical engineering, like you can learn everything online for free, right? And I think when it becomes my time, when I think a lot of people think like me that are my age, I'm 30, when it becomes that time for you to do hiring and you start becoming a manager and you're doing hiring managers, like I think there's going to be a flood of people who are like me, who think like me, who are going to put less value on the college education because there's a lot of old people that are getting ready to retire that are putting those requirements out there. So there's going to be a shift.
I 100% agree with that. And that's why, guys, like if you're watching this right now, like do not get discouraged about the fact that like things aren't working out for you in your career search right now, because that shift is coming like very, very soon, right? Like I'm getting to the stage in my career where in the next 5 years or so, right, like I could be eyeing up management positions where I'm in control of hiring, and I don't have that same mindset of like, oh, well, you need to have a bachelor's degree and you need to have this certification and that certification. Is like, if you have the potential, well, if you can do the job at a basic level and you can be you can come in and you can be operational, and then I can upskill you to do the rest. Right? Like I'd rather have that plus a good team player than like somebody who just has all of these certifications. And a lot of people are getting certifications and like not even writing for the certifications. Like they're getting certifications from like people are taking certifications for people. You know what I'm saying?
I don't have any security certifications.
Me either.
I had Security Plus like 8 years ago, and it never helped me get a job. It never helped me with anything. And I have the AWS Solutions Architect Associate, but it's like I can go and sit for any one of the AWS certs, and I feel confident I can pass it. But I don't have any desire to, right? Because it really is all about the experience. But I will. Let me put this little, asterisk on this thought that there are industries, there are verticals, there are very sensitive systems that will require you to have a higher level of education, a higher level of, security, like a security clearance, things that you can only get through a traditional education. For example, working on healthcare systems that are supporting human life, or SCADA systems, for example, electrical systems. If your desire is to be securing that type of infrastructure that is supporting society's, day-to-day operations, more likely than not, you are going to need some type of formal education in computer science, electrical engineering. You know, I won't guarantee it, but most likely, if your job is to secure a website that is selling t-shirts,
Yeah.
probably not. So what I'm getting at is use your judgment for what your goals are for your career. If you want to have those big aspirations for working on those big systems, more likely you will need an education, just because the nature of the job.
Yep.
But if you're going to be working on like a t-shirt company, it's a little bit different.
Yeah. 100%. I agree with that. You kind of have to have discretion, and it's
Right.
kind of hard, right? It's kind of difficult to have that discretion when you're super early on in your career and you barely know what it is you want to do. So
Absolutely.
I do think that traditional university is a decently, like, I don't agree with the pricing of university. I just don't think that it provides enough value for people to be paying,
No.
monthly payments for pretty much the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But
Where I'm from, they have I'm from in the Texas area. They have associate's degrees that are like specialized associate's degrees in security. It's 2 years you're out, and you get a few certifications on the way. I think that's a much better option than forcing a 4-year degree that's going to cost you $50,000.
yeah,
Like,
I agree.
I think that's why WGU is so big these days too, as well.
Yeah, but that kind of runs into problems as well. Like, I tell a lot of people who ask me about WGU, I've actually been eyeing up their master's degree program in cybersecurity. But I want to say this the right way. I think that, for instance, if I'm a hiring manager and everyone's resume says WGU on it,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be like, all right, what's going on here with, like,
it's a degree farm.
yeah,
or,
you know what I
or
mean?
it feels like one. I get
Yeah,
that.
100% enrollment rate.
Yeah.
Right. But again, at the same time, it's like, I don't really care as long as you can do the job. So
Yeah.
if you went to WGU and just didn't learn anything, then, like, I'm not going to hire you. But
yeah. Well, you're keying on a fundamental, problem with people that are going through interviews right now is they have the credentials, but they can't talk about or do the things that are necessary for the job. And
right.
I run into that all the time. I typically do interviews on the technical side. Whenever my organization's hiring for a security engineer, is people will freeze up, and I get being nervous, and that kind of comes with it. I'm that way too, even to this day. But there is some level of, you need to be able to communicate the things that you know. You need to be able to think through problems. You need to be able to, as much as I hate it, you're going to have to do probably a code review, that kind of thing for a security engineering role. You need to be able to perform, during the interview. And the issue that I run into a lot is these people, they can't.
Yeah.
They have the stuff and they just freeze, or,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made a video about that on TikTok a few months ago where I was like, a lot of people are interested in the pay band that comes with being in the security industry, or the lifestyle, in heavy air quotes, the lifestyle that comes with being in the security industry. But it's like, you're not interested enough to, like, sit and do projects on weekends while your friends are out doing whatever the case may be. Like, even me, like, RASOR Center for me is a project. Like, this is my portfolio. And I'm using it as a dynamic way to, build up my kind of like GRC portfolio, set myself up for, having my own business and my own kind of like consulting firm in the, down the line, educating people, right? Like, it's a multi-dimensional project that I'm working on. That shows not only my GRC expertise, but it shows my leadership skills, my ability to network,
absolutely,
business acumen, everything. So, but like, most people aren't willing to go and try and do something like that because they just, like, I don't get paid from RASOR Center right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get paid for doing these podcasts. I don't get paid from, I haven't monetized TikTok or anything like that. So it's like, yeah. So one final question kind of to close out, or I guess topic to close out, because this can be kind of a can of worms too. But in terms of like content creation, I know you just recently, put out a video that you're going to be kind of like slowing down on platforms like TikTok. What is your cause, I guess, in social media? Like, I understand that you're trying to educate people for free. But like, in terms of monetization, right? Like, what do you, because I don't think that creators are appreciated as much as they should be,
Yeah.
especially creators like yourself who are putting out like college level information. Like, this is like real on the job information where if
Yeah.
you go on your stream and you listen to the things that you're saying and actually apply it, it's like that information that you're getting for free could very well land you in a 6-figure role in X amount of time.
Yeah.
So like, what are your goals to like reward yourself for all the stuff that you do for for the community?
Well, first off, I guess it'd be good to say like what I do. On streams, I typically am going through various cloud certifications. I'm looking at their objectives, and I'm sitting down. I'm saying, oh, I can build a project against this objective that would help somebody. Because a big problem that I run into is people say like, what certification should I get if I want to be a cloud person or a cloud security person? And I say,
Mhm.
well, it's not really about the certs. It's more about, your skills. Well, how do I develop the skills? You build projects, and then naturally they go, well, what kind of projects? So
Right.
I'm like, instead of focusing on doing a minute and a half TikTok, I'll sit here for an hour and do a project live. And
Yeah.
you're going to see me debug it. You're going to see me mess up, and you're going to see me get frustrated. And that's kind of just the vibe.
Yep.
And I'll do that once or twice a week. Typically is maybe like a Monday and a Thursday. And on YouTube, I'll cut that video up and put it on YouTube, make it a little bit more easy to watch. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much about it. I do everything for free because I don't want to be viewed as, this is my boot camp, this is my yada yada. Because when I'm constantly doing those projects like you were just mentioning with RASOR, when I'm doing this is like my project.
Yep.
I'm keeping my skills sharp. I'm looking at certifications. I'm building against the certifications. I'm struggling against the certifications.
Yep.
This is me keeping myself sharp as I would if I was doing a project by myself on a weekend. This is just me doing it in front of everybody, and then you guys get the benefit for it. I don't charge for anything. This is just this is how I view, in today's time, this is how we have to kind of, um, stay up to date with the world of things, I
Yeah.
guess, because things are just changing all the time. So
100%.
I don't really have I have subs on Twitch. I don't beg for them. I don't ask for them. They do it because they get value out of it.
Yep.
And that's about it.
Cool, man. Yeah, like you were saying, same thing here with RASOR Center. It's kind of different with GRC. Like I've been trying to be creative about like, how do I go about making GRC projects and helping people build like GRC portfolios.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult because it's so policy based a lot of time.
Yeah.
But couple like that automation side of things is where I think I could really like me taking people through that learning path, creating creating risk registers, right?
Yes.
Creating risk registers that push out automated reports as assets in sort of like my RASOR Center repertoire, I guess you can say. Right. Those are sort of the things that I'm planning on doing on my YouTube channel as well.
You can look at vendors. Like my organization just onboarded a vendor that does a lot of that stuff. And it's just like, you can do it on your YouTube channel. Like, oh, we're going to review this vendor that, or whatever, or this is how we're going to learn how to build it from scratch. There's there's a tons of things that you can do. It just depends on how creative you are, I guess.
Yep. 100%, man. Well, hey, man, couple last minute items. Number one, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to to hop on and give everybody the this education and talk to me. This is actually, it's funny because this is like the first time that we've actually spoke.
Yeah.
I feel like we've known each other for like a year and a half now. This is the first time we've actually spoke.
Yeah.
So thank you, number one. Thank you for everything that you do for the community as a whole. I know that this, and especially in the content creation space, like just from me to you, bro, like I know how discouraging it can be at times.
It's hard, dude.
I know
It's hard.
how difficult it can be at times to stay consistent and to and then you're giving out stuff for free and people are coming to you saying that you should do more. And so I just want to thank you for the effort that you put into your personal brand and the education that you're giving to the community for completely for free. Thanks for speaking with me. If anyone wants to find your page or find your channels or whatever, you can send them to me and I'll drop them in the link, but you can also just kind of like say them right now.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested, I'm mostly going to be in 2025 focused on Twitch and YouTube. They're both called the Ox, THE. The O is actually the number 0 followed by the letter X. So the Ox. I'm going to be doing some fun stuff. So we'll be doing, like I said earlier, the AWS Solutions Architect Associate Certification. We'll be doing those like once or twice a week. The lives will be on Twitch. The full videos will be posted to YouTube afterwards. But I'm also going to be doing some gaming Q&A, CloudSec Q&A, where I'll play a game for an hour, hour and a half, and answer whatever questions come through the chat. And then on Fridays, I'm even considering doing some research on what they call SCPs, like a horror research anthology thing, more like cooling off on a Friday evening type of stuff. So I'll be online quite a bit. So yeah, cool. Twitch and YouTube. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. I know that I said that was the last thing, but I have one more thing.
Sure.
Outside of security, right? Because like, yeah. and this is something that I've also really appreciated about your content and this is something that I struggle with is like my content is very GRC focused, very career oriented focused, but I've been wanting to kind of like introduce people into different aspects of my life just because like I'm a person outside of
exactly.
of GRC.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are some things that you like to do kind of like outside of the security and IT space?
Yeah, so I guess the big three are gamer. So I play quite a bit of games. I'm also a father, and I do powerlifting, at the local gym. So that's pretty much it. I'm a pretty simple guy, and then when I have time, I'm over here collecting and reading books, all different kinds of stuff. So
cool, man.
Yeah,
cool. All right, man. Well, again, thank you very much for being on. I'm going to. If you guys are interested in the things that we're doing here at RASOR Center, it's just rasorcenter.org. It stands for Risk and Security Open Research. Check it out. Join the newsletter. All of my announcements from here on out are going to be under that newsletter thing. Links are in my bio. I'll put a link here. I'll put a link to all your stuff down as well. Cool. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.